Hello MGTOW, welcome back. Welcome to my channel. Today, um, I want to begin by addressing some of the comments on uh, my biggest last video, in which I talked about how I had given into feminism by sending money to my children. Apparently there were some people, as expected, there were some people who kind of resented me for that, and they, in no uncertain terms, let me know about it in the comment section. They thought that I had made a mistake by sending my children money, that I was in a position to negotiate, um, a better spending of my money, a better way to to have my money spent than by just sending my ex-wife some money. And I want to say that I see me having sent that money to my children as somewhat of an obligation, on top of the child support that I already pay. Um, the truth is that I don't see them as much as I would like to, and sometimes I have had the opportunity to do so, and at other times I haven't. But I also, at this point, I don't care, what happens to the money. Not that I have money to burn, that does not exist, right? But but I don't care what she does with it, as long as the kids know that I send them money. And I think, from my experience, I think she's gonna put it to good use. She does take care of the kids, and that's something I can't hold against her. So that's why I send the money. Like I said, as expected, there were some people who did not like that idea because of everything we stand for here in the MGTOW community, right? But I just, in my mind, I did what I had to do, and I'm satisfied because of that. And so today I have a chance to finally put a video together. My truck is undergoing some previously scheduled maintenance, some things I wanted to do to the truck, and I thought, what a better time, right? Since things are kind of slowing down a bit in the trucking industry, and this was something that I had already planned. I called the mechanics; they're really busy, but I had an appointment, and they said we're still working under despite the quarantine, despite the lockdowns, mechanics are still out there working. So it's I took advantage of that, and I brought my truck in. I'm staying at this hotel, and as you see, the parking lot here at the hotel is empty, so I pretty much have the place for myself. It's a rather big place, and I'm basically the only one here. Maybe a couple of other people or so, but so it's not too busy. So today I want to talk about the softening effect that women have, and how they soften everything they touch, right? And I want to begin by addressing this mindset of dependency, right? I want to talk about what the rejects of the sexual marketplace and what they do. You see, there's this idea that at least in the men's side of things, right? There's always been a group of people in any given civilization that have failed to meet the standards of beauty set by that civilization, and since they have failed to do that, they live just outside or next to the fringes of society when it comes to their dealings in the sexual marketplace. They find ways of coping with their reality, right? They know that they're undesired by members of the opposite sex, by people who they want to be associated with, people who they want to be intimate with. And I'm talking about both men and women. But in the men's side of things, right, men have a way of dealing with this. And what they do usually is that they look desperately. You know, there's this desperate um, uh, response, right? A desperate move towards finding a replacement for the women that aren't there. And is this always the case? No. I mean, there are men out here who are perfectly okay with not having female attention, and they want also to find a replacement for the women who they deem to be inadequate for their, you know, for the satisfaction of their desires. But but I'm talking here specifically about those people who have been rejected in the sexual marketplace, and the way they do the way they deal with it is, they, you know, everything that comes across, right, it becomes an opportunity uh, to replace the one void that they're missing, right? Whether it's, you know, video games, or whether, you know, they become workaholics, or it may be a doll, it may be porn, it may be, you know, masturbation, right? Incessant masturbation. Sometimes, you know, men go into their computers and they become followers of an Instagram model, otherwise known as an Instagram thought. Uh, you know, or they go into websites, right, or apps like OnlyFans, right, or they hire classic prostitutes, right, and to continue with this artificial replacement, right, of things. You know, men also look into artificial wombs, right? You know, in the, you know, in more extreme circumstances, right? Um, we wish to replace, you know, the role that women play as incubators in the you know, in the sexual marketplace. And then there's, of course, artificial intelligence, right? Virtual women, that sort of stuff, you know, etc., etc. But the idea here is, you know, that, you know, anything to replace her crazy butt, right? Anything to replace her, and that is primarily the way in which most men deal with the situation. We see them, you know, we see that women they're just not making the cut, and, you know, we decide that, you know, again, everything that comes across is an opportunity to replace her, or replace a function uh, that she performs, or, you know, fulfills in her role as woman in society. Um, and yes, I am assuming here that women have historically played uh, one role as opposed to other in you know, in the civilization in which they live. So, but the men, right? I'm sorry, the women on the other hand. So what do, right? When they discover for themselves that they're rejects, right? That they're not wanted, that they have very little social and sexual marketplace value. What do? So what they do is they engage in this process of what I'm going to call here, I'm going to call it the mining of the social fabric, or the mining of the social construct, right? So they engage in this, you know, in the absence of their physical strength, right, and of their physical needs. What they have is a need to be taken care of. That much is, you know, it's popular knowledge here in the manosphere, right? And so what they do is they unite, right? They unite in order to guarantee their individual existence. So they work as a group in order to, you know, to continue on existing as they are, right? And to derive as many resources as they can out of society at large, because they don't, you know, they're incapable of of obtaining those resources from one particular man or a small group of men. And the really attractive women, uh, they play this game of being the queen bee, right? And they have, ideally in their minds, they will usually have a group of men, right? And the more the better, directly feeding to uh, whatever uh, things that she's trying to have fulfilled, right? And she would have the pick of the, she would have many choices, right? To from from which to choose from. She will choose directly, right? She will choose the best among her suitors. But when it comes to the social reject, socially rejected women, they don't have those choices. So what they do is they unite with other women, right? And that way they guarantee um, that they try and guarantee that they can continue to derive their nourishment from the exploitation of these abstract social systems that that the respective societies have created. So in that sense, we can look at things like chivalry, we can look at socialism, we can look at things like social norms like politeness, uh, the whole idea of altruism, that is the idea that you live for others, that you're giving, right? The idea of respect for life, or the idea of lack of respect and concern for life, depending on the circumstances. If you look at all these things, if you look at feminism, if you look at polyamory, right? These are all gynocentric endeavors, right? And these social constructs, they exist to keep this subset of genetically undesired group of girls from from facing their inevitable extinction. So, but women, they also deal with this on an individual, this idea that they're undesired. They deal with this on an individual basis as well, on a basic level, on a more basic level, right? Some of them engage in volunteer work as a way to kind of boost their self-image and their ego and flatter themselves, right? And see themselves as worthy. Others, become daycare teachers, right? Others decide that practicing, going into careers like say midwifery or something, right? That suits them best. But one way in which historically all these women have dealt with this rejection, right? Whether it's because they have a face that only a mother could love, maybe they have a fat upper genital area that's deformed, right? Or maybe because she's crazy as can be, right? Although nowadays, because the sexual marketplace is so skewed, her being crazy is not that much of an issue for many guys. But virtually all these rejects, right? Virtually all these women, one of the ways in which they deal with it is that rejection is by adopting a pet. And I mean, I'm gonna continue here defending my views on pet ownership because um, I see that other MGTOW are not taking it seriously, and according to a study, right, from the Center for Disease Control, right, the CDC. That's the same people who are dealing with the coronavirus now, right? And I'm gonna quote here. It says, approximately 4.7 million dog bites occur in the United States each year. That is 4.7 million dog bites that are registered. and it says, and 800,000 of those dog bites result in medical care. And it says the U.S. population is approximately 3.257 million people as of 2017. That was about 3 years ago. And it says that means that a dog bites 1 out of every 69 people. Now, why am I bringing this up? What the hell does all this have to do with, women being rejected, right? And, I'm lucky enough to be able to make the connection here, right? So, how do we get to this point? How do we get to this mess, right? Where we have animals biting people left and right. And we have to remember that, these dogs, these animals, they're nothing but, if not genetically deformed wolves. And we know that these animals, they became domesticated as a result of undergoing conditioned reflex, right? Conditioned reflex training. Ivan Pavlov's style, right? In which they were fed discarded human food, right? Cooked food, which is the most addictive substance known to man. Cooked food stuff, right? And if you take a look, crack cocaine is cooked, right? It's not the raw coca leaf. It's cooked. So, but that's beside the point. What I want to say here is that, at one point these animals were our predators, and it was if we only have to go as far back as medieval England, right, or medieval Europe, and people were afraid to go in the forest, right? The forest was this mysterious place in which anything could be, anything could happen, right, good or bad. But for the most part, there were gangs of marauders, right, assaulting people. And it was full of wild animals, right, untamed beasts, and wolves were, the chance of finding a lonely wolf out in the forest, right, or a pack of wolves for that matter, right. It was reason enough to keep a lot of people from going in there, from going into the forest, right. People kept to themselves in small villages, right. They lived in small villages. So it is my belief, and this is how I'm making the connection here. It is my belief that women, in their desire to become mothers, that is these rejected women, right, women who didn't make the cut in the sexual marketplace, they ended up engaging in this, most absurd practice of animal domestication, for non-productive purposes. Of course, I'm not talking about, livestock, right? I'm not talking about work animals. And they were partly responsible, if not fully responsible, for bringing these this genetic oddities into our homes. And they did this as a way to fulfill their emotional desires for companion, and for significance, whatever significance they may get from that. So the men just kind of ended up following along, right? And they just kind of adopted the practice as normal, right? Without giving it much thought. And in fact, we have to look at the type of women, the social outcast, who in her search for meaning has historically engaged in ritual, and witchcraft and this sort of stuff, right? What comes to mind, right? We think of the Salem witches, right? And how many of them were ugly, right? Quote unquote ugly, right? And how many of them did not have children. And so when a woman, right, when she is without child, it's the children of other women that she scares the most. And these sexual marketplace rejects, they have tended to become, the cat and the dog moms of today, right? That is the woman with a mole on her, her oversized nose, right? She's the one that tends to gravitate towards this practice of adopting animals, just for companionship. We have to think about the crazy cat lady that resides on every town in modern day America, right? And she puts barrels of plastic barrels with little containers of food, right? Tipped to the side, right, with little containers of food there for the animals to come over and eat it at night, right? For the cats, because she's so concerned that the animals may not have enough food to eat, so she feels as though she has to go out there and make sure the animals are well fed. This is lunacy. This is preposterous, simply because the animals, they don't need us and we don't need them. It's as simple as that. Nowadays, with in this post-industrial, actually this electronic age of ours, right? Information era in which we live, we have found many replacements for animals, right? The car replaced the horse, right? And so did the locomotive, and so forth and so on, right? So we don't need these animals, and they don't really need us, right? In fact, we are hurting them, we are weakening them, and when we feed them cooked food, like we consume, they get sick just like we do, right? Whereas if they were left to their own devices in nature, right, most of these genetic oddities will simply not make the cut. Some will, and but most won't. So how do we get to this mess? Where we have situations like this, right? And I think we got to this mess because, and I'm talking about this mess. When I talk about this mess, I talk about not just animal domestication, but I talk about the mess that we have going on with feminism, right? How do we get to this? How do we get to today, and the situation which we're facing, right, regarding women, right? And I want to say that the reason why we got into this mess is because of the softening effect, what I call the softening effect. See, women have a soft touch to everything. Everything, how Midas, everything he touches turns to gold. Everything that women touch turns soft. Everything turns soft. We've already touched on how they managed to turn wolves into docile puppies, right? Docile little cats and dogs, right? We already touched on that. But it's more than that. They also soften up things that they come into contact with. Now you say, Sweet Padre, what do you mean they soften up things? And for one example of this, we have to look at what happened to a particular automobile. Let's take a look at the Jeep Wrangler, right? The Jeep Wrangler. We're talking World War II, Vietnam. These vehicles were used for transporting small units of military personnel, and perhaps even going into battle, right? These were rugged vehicles, right? The tires, the suspension, the design of the car, right? Everything was rugged. It was built, sturdy and built with hard edges, right? And built to last, built to go into tough terrain, right? But then, of course, after the war, right? General Motors came up with a commercial version of it. But as the years have gone by, right, we've seen that more and more women have started to purchase these vehicles, and they purchase this sort of this sort of vehicle as a way to announce to the world that they too are able to do the same as men, right? That they're able to drive the same thing that a man can drive, right? That they're equal to men in that regards, as well as in others. But what has really happened to the Jeep Wrangler, right, and to the company that makes them, right, is that this particular automobile, in fact, has become soft. If you look at the Jeep Wrangler today, right, it's nothing like the Jeep Wrangler of yesterday. It's a Jeep Wrangler, with a dashboard that's made of of foam, with rounded edges, right, inside out. It's got a rollover cage, which makes the vehicle round on the outside. It's got all these electronic systems, satellite radio in many instances, right, navigation, you name it, right. So it's by no means the same vehicle that it was, say 40, 50, 60 years from ago, right. It's a vehicle that is very soft, and on top of that, it's unreliable. It's a car that the modern mechanic will not purchase, right, because they know that it's an unreliable car. It's also overpriced. It's also overpriced. So in that sense, with the company catering to women, right, by putting together a vehicle that appeals to women, they have turned themselves upside down, and they have created something that is very soft. Everything has become soft, fragile, and in that sense, women, they have this softening effect. It's a softening effect, again, not just on animals but on things. The next thing that women soften up is women soften up men, right? In our interactions with members of the opposite sex, we men become soft. We just have to hang around them, right? We just have to hang around them, and before we know, we start adopting many of their mannerisms, many of their beliefs, many of the ways in which they put those beliefs together into practice, right? And so there's the creation of the mangina, right? The man that has pretty much been created by women, right? If you look at a lot of the young kids being raised today by single mothers, they fit this description, right? And in many ways, I mean, you have to look at these guys, and they're one state, many of them are one step short of just taking it in the butt, right? Because that's what their mothers, their body language, right? It's what it's what they see in their mothers, right? And so women soften up men, right? The way they speak, the way, if we take into account, right, the way in which women talk to men, like, the guilting, the shaming, right? All these ways of communicating, right? They have the effect of having a man give up on his standards, right? Give up his standards, give up his his manhood, in a sense, right? Give up his sturdiness, right? It's a debilitating effect that they have on men, and that is the number one reason why I stay away from women. As a monk, I say to myself, I cannot afford. I do not want to be a victim of this. I cannot afford to become soft. I cannot afford to become uncompetitive, because that's what happens when you take on this mindset that everything goes and that you're gonna work together as a team with other people, when in fact this obvious, for the most part, almost always ends up not working. Uh, Usually, when teams are effective, it's because individuals within that group see that the group is going to benefit them individually, and the group exists effectively as a group for as long as that remains the case. So, I cannot afford to become soft. I do not want to become feminized. And again, that's the number one reason why I stay away from women. But last but not least, women have a softening effect on systems. They have a softening effect on political systems, and they have a softening effect on economic systems. They have, we have to look at what has happened politically as women have become more prevalent in the political arena, right? How that system, which men created for the for the guaranteed peace and prosperity and order of the society in which they live, has turned into a shit show, more so than it ever was. All right. And last but not least, the economic effect. Right? The economic, the softening of the economic sphere. Right? Women tend to, as I've mentioned at the beginning of this video here, they tend to want to bunch up and be in groups, and they believe that that a top down approach to to being part of a group, an altruistic approach to being part of a group is going to solve their problems. It's going to guarantee their well-being. It's going to see that their needs are met. And so they end up softening up an economic system as well. And we have, as men, created a society in which women's needs as well as children's needs are looked after before our own. And in that sense, we have allowed women to tell us, right, to what sort of world to create, a world that is safe for for the meek, and so this softening effect is nothing to be messed with. It's real. It's an effect that it's a force that we encounter every day in our lives.